Tampa Stadium, nicknamed the Big Sombrero and briefly known as Houlihan Stadium, was a large open-air stadium, maximum capacity about 74,000, located in Tampa, Florida, which opened in 1967 and was significantly expanded in 1974–75. The facility is most closely associated with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the National Football League, who played there from their establishment in 1976 until 1997. It also hosted 2 Super Bowls, in 1984 and 1991, as well as the 1984 USFL Championship game. To meet the revenue demands of the Buccaneers' new owners, Raymond James Stadium was built nearby in 1998, and Tampa Stadium was demolished in early 1999. Besides the Bucs, Tampa Stadium was home to the Tampa Bay Rowdies of the original North American Soccer League, the Tampa Bay Bandits of the United States Football League, the Tampa Bay Mutiny of Major League Soccer, and the college football programs of the University of Tampa and the University of South Florida. It also hosted many large concerts, and for a time, it held the record for the largest audience to ever see a single artist, and a crowd of almost 57,000 witnessed a Led Zeppelin show in the facility in 1973. Origin and design. Prehistory and construction. The land on which Tampa Stadium was situated had been the perimeter of Drew Field, a World War II-era airfield which was the precursor to Tampa International Airport. In 1949, the city of Tampa bought a 720-acre, 290 hectares, grassy parcel between the airport and West Tampa from the federal government with the idea of eventually building a community sports complex. 3. Al Lopez Field was the first phase of the project, opening in 1955. However, further development stalled for several years after that. Though the city of Tampa already had a long history with amateur and minor league professional sports and had undergone tremendous growth after World War II, it did not yet have a modern football stadium as the 1960s began. The 2 largest extant venues were both located across the Hillsborough River from downtown: Plant Field, which had been built in the 1890s and consisted of a single grandstand and a large open field, and Phillips Field, which had been built in the 1930s as the home of the University of Tampa's football team. Some of Tampa's civic leaders began to discuss plans for attracting an expansion or relocated professional football franchise to the area by the early 1960s and arranged an exhibition game between the American Football League's Buffalo Bills and New York Jets at Phillips Field on August 8, 1964. Though temporary bleachers were installed to increase capacity to 17,000, actual attendance was less than 6,000. 5. Realizing that the venue was too small and primitive to support a professional football franchise, the city decided to construct a large modern football facility which could be used by the Tampa Spartans in the short term and could be expanded to serve as the home field for an NFL or AFL franchise in the future. 6. Construction of Tampa Stadium began in the fall of 1966 just beyond the left field wall of Al Lopez Field, which was by then the home of the Tampa Tarpons of the Florida State League and the spring training home of the Cincinnati Reds. The plot purchased by the city in 1949 was large enough to host separate football and baseball venues, training facilities for the Reds, and several acres of parking spaces. 7. Original design. When it opened in 1967, Tampa Stadium consisted of a matching pair of large arch-shaped concrete grandstands with open end zones. The seating consisted of long, backless aluminum benches that were accessed via short tunnels, vomitoria, which connected the seating area to wide, open concourses at the rear of the grandstands. The benches were arranged in 2 large tiers divided by a horizontal walkway about halfway up the grandstands. The slope of the grandstands was relatively steep, giving every seat a direct and unobstructed view of the field. The official capacity was 46,481, though temporary bleachers could be placed in one or both end zones if needed. Tampa Stadium underwent an extensive expansion project in 1974 to 1975 after the city was awarded an NFL expansion team. Over 27,000 seats were added by completely enclosing the open-end zones with seating areas that blended into the existing 2-tiered grandstands and created 2 walkways that completely encircled the seating bowl at ground level and about 40 rows up. The finished stadium had the largest capacity in the NFL, 71,908.14, and was not in the shape of a simple bowl. The top of the stadium was in the shape of a wave, which was highest at the center of the two sideline grandstands and gently sloped downward to a rounded corner where it met the end zone sections, which were a little more than half as tall. Much later, the stadium was dubbed the Big Sombrero by ESPN's Chris Berman for the unique undulating hat/wave shape created by the 1975 expansion. The last major renovation took place in the early 1980s when, in preparation for its first Super Bowl in January 1984, the press box atop the West Grandstand was expanded and updated, and a large new suite of luxury boxes was added atop the East Grandstand. This configuration gave the facility its maximum seating capacity of 74,301. For the 1990 season, which culminated in the stadium's second Super Bowl, large flagpoles were mounted on the upper rim of the stadium as part of a stadium update that included the addition of a jumbotron screen in the south end zone and smaller scoreboards above the field-level tunnels in two corners of the stadium. The poles were used to fly large flags for each of the NFL's teams until 1997, when the Buccaneers adopted a uniform redesign featuring a red flag on their helmets. Large versions of the flag were hoisted on the stadium's flagpoles and the Buccaneers penetrated their opponent's 20-yard line. The franchise continued this practice when it moved to Raymond James Stadium next door a year later. Playing surface. Over the lifetime of Tampa Stadium, the natural grass turf consisted of several varieties of Bermuda grass, most notably Tifway 419. The playing surface was consistently one of the best in the NFL, and was regularly named a player's favorite in surveys conducted by the National Football League Players Association. Heat. Tampa Stadium was built almost exclusively of concrete. Throughout its existence, exterior walls were painted light tan or white or left as bare concrete, as were the flooring surfaces. Seating consisted of long aluminum benches, and there was no roof or overhang of any kind over the field or seating areas. While the stadium's minimalist design allowed for very good sight lines, it also exposed both spectators and players to the full brunt of Tampa's subtropical climate. This was especially true after the stadium was fully enclosed for the Buccaneers' 1976 inaugural season, cutting off breezes which had flowed through the open end zones, while fans could retreat under the grandstands to the shade of the wide concourses where concessions and restrooms were located. Players and personnel on the field had no such recourse. Cooling equipment was usually placed near the sideline benches. The Buccaneers were also allowed to wear their white jerseys at home, forcing their opponents to suffer in their darker, and hotter, jerseys. During the summer and early autumn, events in the stadium were often scheduled in the evening hours to avoid the often oppressive afternoon heat and humidity. In another nod to local weather, the natural grass playing surface was highly crowned to provide rapid drainage during Tampa's intense thunderstorms, with the sidelines almost 18 inches lower